Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Facebook and YouTube page. Hello and good evening to all of you watching live. The chat's always fun, but remember, we can't get to all the chats, and your chats may show up in the show. And if you can't catch us live, catch the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, Jason Richards. Hello and good evening.
Hello and good evening. Jason Richards here, member of Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio, and past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia.
Woo! And next up, Joe Martinez. How you doing, Joe?
Woo! Yes, Joe Martinez. Hi. Just making weird noises tonight, aren't you?
Woo!
Yeah, Joe Martinez. Let's see. Past and current master of Manassas Lodge, number 182 in Manassas, Virginia. Member of Things and Stuff. And yeah, let's get it on. I'm jazzed. Let's do it.
Let's get it on.
Not that kind of show.
Thank you to our many patrons who support the show. You guys are awesome and rock our socks. So head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable if you'd like to chip in and keep this free Masonic education free for hopefully 2040.
15 more years, maybe. 15
That's
more
the
years.
goal. All right, we could do it.
Us Freemasons, we move the goalposts. So, it'll be moving more and more and more. So, yeah.
There's like some Hillman Award in it for you if you join.
Yes. If you join before 2040, there will be a prize.
There's a nice certificate with a coffee stain on it.
Surprise! It's a heaping plate of disappointment.
Nice. Way to sell it. Awesome. Okay. Let's transition to everyone's favorite segment, especially Joe's.
Tarot card of the week.
Whether it's jazz hands or jazz fingers.
Yes, tarot fingers.
That was your nickname in college, wasn't it?
Yeah, only on Fridays. After happy hour.
All right.
Okay. Let's talk about it. What do we got, Jason?
Tonight, we have the Craft Felt Tarot.
Oh, those are nice.
Really cool handmade deck that was made out of cut felt.
Do you have to go to Joanne Fabrics and buy the pieces and assemble it to do
it? Someone did. And then they took a bunch of high-res photos of each of the cards and then got them printed. Interesting. So tonight's card is the Queen of Wands.
Ooh.
Nice.
And I dig it because she's holding a cat.
Oh, of course. Queen of Wands. I like it.
Yep.
And a wand.
We've had Queen of Wands come up quite a bit on the show, surprisingly. The reason I remember that is because, again, I like to do people that I know that have the energy of that card. Right. So it keeps coming back with someone who's high energy, doesn't take any crap, very strong maternal woman, just will rule the household, very matriarchal. Right.
Me.
Go seizes the day. So that's a really good, powerful card.
Carpes the hell out of that DM.
It does.
Yes.
So yeah, so go take that, do that with what you will, or apply it to this week's episode about Masonry broke my faith. What? Let's learn all about that. That'll be fun.
Come for the Masonry, stay for the clickbait.
It wasn't too clickbaity. Could have made it worse.
It could have been a lot worse. Yes,
it's just enough.
There was a bit of clickbaitiness there. Yes, I even saw the picture for this week, and I'm like, crap, that's what we're talking about tonight? I'm like, that's going to be zesty.
spicy, as it were.
Yes.
It's gotta be
Okay,
spicy.
so here's why we're talking about this one. Timing is really good because for a lot of Christian Freemasons, right? We just celebrated the Easter holiday season, and we just did an episode last week on religious Masonic rituals to include the Maundy Thursday service and other other types of rituals that happen that are borderline religious in nature, and so and then come to find out that part 2 of Jason's interview with the Ohio Lodge, part 3 was part 3. Man, you can talk. Part 3.
We didn't listen to it all, Jason.
The other two episodes were half as long.
I could listen to you
really
talk all
have
day. So
no
part 3 of the Ohio Lodge of Research's interview with you, where you actually open up. You were very vulnerable about your faith journey, and that's been really fascinating because when I stepped back, I thought, wait a minute, like all of us have had some sort of growth, transformation, change in our respective faith journeys, some of which have actually been influenced by Freemasonry. So let's talk about that. I think it'll be fun to compare notes and see how have we changed over the years and if Freemasonry had a hand in that as well. But before we do, let's talk about one little comment that was said at the very last minute of last week's episode in the YouTube chat. And it was so spicy, back to use that spiciness, that I think it's worth addressing again and having a conversation about the religious versus religion nature of Masonry. Right, Joe?
Yeah, that comment, it left me like a good night at an authentic Mexican restaurant. It's like, it's yummy, but then 2 hours later, you actually feel the spiciness, in other ways. And it's like, it just sat with you.
Burns twice as much.
It burns twice
Second time around.
Yeah. And we couldn't finish the conversation. Yeah. So yeah, perfect. So this was a comment that a listener posted. He said, I don't find Mason's arguments convincing, saying it's religious, not a religion, or it's spiritual. That shifts the goalpost and is more wordplay than tackles the topic. Well, no. So, so let's move on to the next thing. I'm just kidding. No, and I actually do, and we talked about this offline and a little bit on the show last week. I, too, have a problem with that statement. Freemasonry is not a religion, but it is religious, right? Because people today don't use the word religion the same way that they did 50 years ago or 100 years ago or
good point.
Ago, right? So you've got folks like Benjamin Franklin, right, who would use the word religion and it meant it didn't mean religion with a big R, like this church or that mosque or that synagogue. It wasn't talking about a particular faith, just an overall system. So I too don't like that term. I really dislike that term. It really should say spiritual instead of religious, because I think it really highlights the point that we're trying to get across, right? But and we said it last week, and John said it last week as well. Nobody here is going to tell you that Freemasonry is a religion, right? Because it doesn't meet the criteria to be an organized religion. Now, there's a bunch of people getting around a symbol of faith or symbols of faith and doing spiritual things. 100% yes. But it has no dogma. Nowhere in Freemasonry is it going to say we have the exclusive and only truth that's out there. Doesn't say it. It doesn't offer, and I know we kind of, I'm saying this on the heels of doing an episode with Brother Michael Pohl, but it does not offer sacraments for the purpose of rites of salvation, right? So you don't do this thing in Freemasonry and end up being saved, right? Or your soul being saved.
Or get any personal advantage, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, spot on. It does not assert a one true theology. And it doesn't teach about the characteristics of God outside of requiring belief in a supreme being, right? We keep it very generic. We use generic nomenclature, the grand artificer of the universe or the great architect of the universe.
Their mileage may vary by jurisdiction.
Absolutely, yeah. But they are the point of those titles or names are not to be specific. So we're not saying Allah, we're not saying Yahweh, we're not saying Jesus. That's done on purpose, right?
But
then
we
go ahead.
the ritual does make two dogmatic assertions, right? That the great architect of the universe is the creator of all things. And we make the second dogmatic assertion, that is, the soul lives on after death. And we teach the immortality of the soul.
The immortality of the soul. Yeah.
Are they assertions or are they requirements to join? So, like, we don't, you know what I
would
mean?
say they're assertions because, your mileage may vary. On the petition, in some jurisdictions, there is not any language, requiring, belief in the immortality of the soul.
Well, in some petitions, there is.
Correct, but not
Yeah.
all of them.
Not all of them. Yeah. So that's why I wouldn't call it dogmatic, right? Because it's not universal. There are, with few exceptions or deviations, when we move on to different types of Freemasonry. For the most part, most regular Freemasonry considers a belief in a supreme being. You go to some countries, they slap a name on it. So when you start to get that granular, I would say that. But I mean, for me, dogma is it's declared by a single authority, right? Whether that's a pope or a deity or something, right? It comes down from authority. It's non-negotiable. It either is or it isn't, right? So, getting into that universality, it's a little bit different depending on where you go. And oftentimes it deals with the purpose of that dogmatic characteristic is to be theological, to lead towards salvation or to a single source of truth. Like, you will do this piece of dogma because it leads you to this faith, right? So yeah, that's me and dogma.
And so half of me is really tired and just doesn't want to debate you any further, and half of me is digging my heels in, and saying that, Masonry teaches that God is the creator and that the soul is immortal. And those are things that are like
I'm
left out in the open. All right.
I'm gonna massage those muscles of exhaustion and get you to pull that thread a little further. So I would claim
you would be wrong.
I would, because it doesn't you have to, before you're even a Mason, that is a condition. So I would contend it's not teaching you jack shit about that. It's teaching you that you already have to have that condition in order to walk through the door, right? Like, we don't let people who don't already know or feel or understand that there was a great architect that created the everything or is a supreme being before he goes through the initiation of Freemasonry.
So belief in the supreme being, sure, predicates kind of the, well, like, does the supreme being need to be the one who has created all? What if it is the supreme being who is the head of a pantheon of gods, and the demiurge actually was the one that created the world?
Now we're getting back into individual flavorings of Freemasonry, because by that rationale, people like that would not be allowed in certain jurisdictions. It has to be a single supreme being. There's no mini supreme beings or sub supreme beings. There is a supreme being. So this
isn't Florida.
No, it's not. But there's many jurisdictions in the United States that say it's a single prime mover, right? It's not.
What about Trinitarian Christians? Because there's not one supreme being; it's three supreme beings.
Be a whole other show.
But in one, okay.
Oh yes, that could be a whole other show.
Just turn the wrench a little bit.
But anyway,
this was fun.
Yeah, this was fun.
I think, again, I want to go back to one thing you said, right? Because I know you're balancing between religious versus religion, and the phrase you use is interesting, right? About how do you balance more spiritual versus religious?
Sure. So we've defined what religion is and how Freemasonry in general doesn't meet those criteria, right? But if you were to say that Freemasonry is spiritual, I would say it absolutely is, because it asks candidates to believe in a supreme being, no matter what we call him, but we don't ask them to define him or her or it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
It uses symbolism drawn from sacred things to convey moral and metaphysical lessons, right? not dogmatic, right? It uses them, and we flat out tell people these are moral lessons, right? That have sacred things inside. Its rituals involve obligations, which some people take sacred, stories of allegorical death and rebirth, the path towards light, and introspection. And these are elements that are found in some places in religions, in some places mystery traditions, but all places of enlightenment seeking, right? So it doesn't have to fit in a box of a particular church or denomination. And I think one of the last ones that separates it is it encourages, even though we like to do this together, it encourages a personal journey towards that truth seeking, towards that virtue seeking, and at least trying to find some harmony with something greater than yourself, right? And I think that's the big delimiter, because in most organized faith systems, you got to be part of the club and you have to have a card, right?
And they want you to be more in the club as you grow.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's why, and how this all started, for those just joining, it's the whole statement, and in some places it's ritual. Freemasonry is not a religion, but it is religious. And like I said, I hate that. I think spiritual would be a much better word, because again, it all gets down to, if you read Pike, if you read Benjamin Franklin, if you read books from the early and late 19th centuries, they use the word religion way differently than we do today. And I think it just confuses people, like our friend who showed up last week.
But I don't know if spiritual is necessarily any better, because there are people who cannot distinguish spirituality from salvation, or from a relationship with God that requires salvation. And so it's hard for some people to distinguish, spirituality from religion. And so is it the same wordplay
No,
that
I don't
the commenter was thinking about?
So if you were to say not a religion but religious to someone of that mindset, I can see how they could come back at us and say that's BS, right? Because you just said this. Yeah. I would hope, and I'm not answering your question, but I would hope that someone who'd make that argument when we said the word spiritual does know that there's a huge difference between religiosity and spirituality, right? Now, that's taking that with a grain of salt.
We're assuming a lot.
I am assuming a lot, but I'm assuming that people understand the English language, right? And that's a bare minimum, But
Also
if we want to have an intelligent conversation about it, there is a big difference. So, but you're not wrong.
Yep.
That's all you had to say.
I think we've beat that dead horse to death.
And keep searching for more light.
It has reanimated to ask us kindly to stop beating it.
Yes. So one thing that I think is worthy to share, and I know Jason did a great job sharing his personal story, but I mean, I don't think I've ever gone into detail about how my personal faith journey has actually been changed as a direct result of Freemasonry. So here we go, right? The way I started, yes, pull up a chair and a snack. My faith started, I was baptized, born and raised in the Methodist church, a little tiny church out in the middle of nowhere. I was the youngest person in my church next to my mother, right? And so it was very hard to find a community of people my age, but I still stuck with it. Was around lots of little blue-haired little old ladies for most of my upbringing. And, just went through the motions, did everything, got confirmed, and just checked the boxes and had a good time doing it. Went to college, and that's much harder to do in college, right? And you get to kind of figure out who you are. You get to detach a little bit, and then ended up here in Northern Virginia and started thinking about, okay, maybe I should find a church again. So fortunately, I found the same church that Jason ended up going to. So that was kind of a cool story to have those paths aligned. And things were going great. And then I joined Freemasonry. Dun, dun, dun. I got raised, initiated, passed, and raised in 2007. And as I was going through that, I was already kind of got my feet wet in my career, and again starting to explore who I am professionally and now spiritually. And the whole time, I was growing in my Masonic learnings as well. So I'm studying. After all the catechisms, I'm starting to do more research. And I have said on the show before that some of the biggest disappointments in Freemasonry were when I learned this really cool thing about a piece from our lectures, for example. And I'd come to lodge and I'd share it with past masters, because they're past masters. They've been masters. They're beyond masters. And they were like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "What, you haven't heard this?" Because I'm reading this all on the internet, and the expectation versus reality gap started to be a little weird. So I'm starting to read things about like the Kabbalah and how it relates to ornaments in the temple. And I'm like, but no one else sees this, right? Like, we all went through the same degrees, and I'm trying to say these things, and I'm trying to look for like-minded individuals that are reading the same kind of things. And it's like, you're dipping your toes in the water, reading things that are unorthodox, that are outside of my faith system, that it's like, I needed to get permission. I needed to give myself permission to explore these things, because I would have never been exposed to some of these things if I had not joined Freemasonry, because all the writings of people that throughout the past, that you can now easily search these different viewpoints on symbolism and their syncretic religious influences over time. I started getting exposed to faith systems, mystery schools, religious practices, and like religious structures that I had never heard of. And I would have never heard of anyway if I stayed in my little country church, right, where I grew up. That just would have been purely, it would have been like going to a foreign country. It's just a completely foreign concept. Yeah, so giving yourself permission is the hardest part. Well said, Bubba. Because the next step of giving myself permission was, now I'm starting to get into occult reading as well. Occult meaning hidden, not satanic.
The O word.
Hidden. Occult meaning hidden, not satanic, right? So now it's like, oh, wait a minute. What does tarot have to do with Freemasonry? And what does that have to do with my faith, right? So
when we first brought out Tarot Card of the Week several years ago, we got so much vitriol.
Like, what is this? What are you guys doing?
Comments. Like, it was.
Now you love it. Now you love it.
The side up, baby.
The outro, and all the things in the middle. So guess what, people? You're growing. Look at that.
You're going to grow whether you like it or not.
And we've shown you, yes, just like I have. But yeah, no, that's amazing. I have a question though.
Yeah, please jump in. Yeah, because don't have too much more, but yeah, since you can't wait, I'll just let you go ahead and talk.
You take a drink and settle down there, Bubba. So you said you started going to the same church that Jason was going to, but you were not a Freemason yet. Did you meet Jason before you were a Freemason?
After I was a Freemason.
He and I figured out that we attended the same church.
Oh,
and
you didn't know
before I
Thank you for that.
was a Freemason.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I was researching the craft after meeting the man who became my mentor, David Hill. And back in 2010, 2011, like stuff written on the craft from a Christian perspective was universally negative. And so I was like, dude, I need to find a Christian who's a Freemason so I can actually figure out what this stuff is about. And he took me upstairs and introduced me to John.
Yeah. So it was good to see people of like mind, right? And not just same faith system, but literally the same church, right? But again, that was also validating too, that, hey, I got someone else who's weird in the weird club that goes to my exact same church and is also interested in joining the Freemasonry as well.
Yeah, we have a past Sovereign Grand Inspector General of the Scottish Rite who goes to our church. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so it's fun because, again, bit by bit, I was dipping the toe a little bit deeper, being exposed to new systems, and it started to, if nothing else, expose me to more systems religiosity, if you want to, doubly load a term that we've been fighting over for the first 15 minutes of the show. And so then I started then applying it, right? Because it's get out of your head and start applying that to your faith. Again, a good Freemason is one who actually applies the symbols and practices and methods and charges of Freemasonry to become a better person. So this, I took it literally. I took what we're here to do and started, well, let me just apply more of this. How does this fit into my faith structure? So I used the materials and the reading and the research and the presentations I was putting together as building blocks on top of my faith. So I've said it multiple ways, but I think the simplest way I can say it is Freemasonry didn't change my faith. It added a bonus track on top of it, right? It actually just was icing on the cake, as it were, because I could now start with something that I was foundationally rooted into, and then see how all these different systems plugged into that, right? We've said on the show before, there are many paths to the top of the mountain, and yet this is the one that worked for me. So this is my path, and I can see to the top of the mountain, and I can start applying these different practices and schools to my foundation, right? So I didn't change my foundation. So, the clickbaity title, How Masonry Broke My Faith, it actually doubled down my faith. That's really the beauty of it, is that it took what was already there and actually enhanced it. And it went from 1080p to 4K, to use that metaphor.
You dork.
Well, and John, I think it's interesting that you kind of end on that imagery of many paths to the same summit of the mountain. When I joined Freemasonry, my faith structure was that sure, there are many paths, but my mountain is the only true one. My mountain's the best,
right,
and it's the only one. And so what I get into this in a lot more detail on the OLR Connections podcast, so I won't belabor the point here, but Freemasonry and the Masons specifically who I met helped me kind of break down that idea that my faith had legitimacy and supremacy above all others.
Interesting.
And I think that was the breaking point of my faith for me, hence the episode title. It's that I could not justify any longer thinking that I and the people who likewise believed in my brand of Christianity were the ones who were eligible for salvation, and everyone else, eternal torment. Sorry. And interacting with varied men of faith who are incredible, beautiful people is one of the things that really caused me to question and re-examine, and ultimately go into a 10-year long period of deconstruction. And a lot of, like, you can if you've been watching the Masonic Roundtable for the past 11 years, you can see like kind of that journey in my kind of outlook and my commentary, because I deconstructed through most of this show.
Yeah, I do remember flat out talking about esoterics for early TMR seasons. And you were like, nope, not my bag. I'm happy you guys can do that, but not for me.
I'm the history guy. I just want to talk about history.
And
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
and that's because I was, I was insecure in my faith structure because there was a lot of cognitive dissonance because it just didn't seem right. And I was scared to death to open myself up to other paths up the same mountain and see that there is legitimacy and goodness and truth in all faith structures that seek to deepen your relationship with your creator and deepen your love for others.
Well, I mean, that's the big thing that both of you said, and I'm truly grateful that y'all are sharing. And I mean, Jason on the OLR, I mean, that was buku sharing. So I mean, kudos for the bravery there. But I think the one takeaway that, and people are mentioning it, is that people who are mature and can think for themselves need it's not like want, but need to understand that inquiring about the metaphysical nature of things is going to overlap with traditional religious thought, but it doesn't mean that they have to be one and the same thing, right? They can complement each other, and that scares the crap out of people, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to be one and the same, and some people cannot make that distinction.
Yes. And I'll add to that and say there was a really good quote. It's been sometimes attributed to Ella Fitzgerald, but I don't think she was the originator of it. But it basically paraphrased, it says that the true nature of intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas and not feel like you have to choose one over the other.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. So it is a really mature way of thinking. But it's not just like I can't read about that because my dogma says I can't, or I'm afraid that if I dip my toe in the water, I can't control myself, right?
That's how he was, and he's honest about it. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's crazy, but
I'm up here.
Yeah.
You've got yourself mirrored, Joe. So
oh crap!
You're pointing at John.
There you go. That's the right guy.
Yeah.
Oh hi.
Yeah. Ooh. Oh. Easy on the bits. So, like, one of the things that I really struggled with very early on in my Masonic journey is, look, we've talked at length about how the opening and closing of a lodge is the consecration and purging of a sacred space. And as part of that consecration of a sacred space, you invoke deity, and there's prayer that happens. I had a really hard time, praying the same prayer with people of different faiths. I was worried that I was committing blasphemy because, I'm praying to my God, but this person right next to me, they're praying to some other God. I mean, it's all the same. But that was something that, like, I talk on the podcast, like I had to talk to my dad about that and figure out, like, what does this mean, and am I going to be condemned to eternal torment by blaspheming God by praying with a non-believer?
Man, you just I don't usually talk about the long ago times, before Joe was a Mason, but you totally reminded me of I'm gonna tell a story, and I haven't thought about this in a very long time, so thank you for that. But this was before Joe was a Mason. I think I had started reading weird Dan Brown books, so I was certainly interested, but I was not in the United States.
Were you a Dan Brown Mason, Joe?
I totally was a Dan Brown Mason. But this was early 2000s. I was not in the country. I was in another country, a foreign country. And it was the first time I had ever walked into another building of faith, and walked in with a bunch of people because it was their time to pray. And they invited me in, and I took my shoes off and I went inside. And I asked the question because I didn't know any better. I'm like, is it okay for me to be in here? It's like, yeah, you pray to your God and I'll pray to my God and we'll all pray together. And that knocked my hair back. And that was like,
when you had hair.
I did have hair. It was very sexy hair. But that experience blew me away. I was like, I'm in a room filled with people that are praying to a completely, well, not really, but a different interpretation of deity. And they were so welcoming and awesome to have me in there with them. And again, this is before I got weird with Freemasonry. It changed my outlook on things, you know, and it definitely changed my outlook on faith. And I think I've told my faith story here. But if not, I guess I will.
No, I want to hear it.
Do it.
Yeah. So I can honestly say that Masonry, we'll go right to the end. Masonry has definitely changed how I express my faith, but it maybe hasn't changed it. So for those who don't know, I grew up in New York. And where I grew up in New York, there were only two faith systems. You were either Roman Catholic or you were Jewish. There was nothing in between. So everybody that lived on my block growing up, they were either Roman Catholic or they were Jewish. That's it. I did not know what a Protestant was until I left New York. Okay. I'm like, what the hell is a Baptist? What is a Lutheran? Methodist? That sounds weird. I don't know what these things are. And I honestly didn't, right? Because that's the only flavor of Christianity that I knew. And I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade, wore a uniform, did all the things. But when I had left between college and the Army, I definitely started to have personal issues with Catholicism, right? I love going to church. I love the ritual of Mass. And where I was in New York, I guess the church I went to, they had issues with Vatican II. This was like 25 years after it had passed. And they were like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do Latin church and we're going to do this, And so, I'm sitting there as a boy of 9-10 years old, listening to the Mass in Latin and stuff like that. And I love that stuff. I thought it was cool, the ritual of it. And everything that happened during the ritual of the Mass had a purpose, right? So I enjoyed that, but there was, this is the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. There's a lot of baggage that came with being a part of the Catholic Church, right? It was like very anti this and very anti that. And those things were pronounced and they were in your face. So, I had, again, all the friends I grew up with were the same faith system, but you had them and their parents just saying really awful things about the rest of the world. You know what I mean? And I'm like, is this your faith talking or your own personal opinions? Like, I can't distinguish between the two because I'm hearing it everywhere, and we're supposed to be cosmopolitan. We're supposed to love everybody. And I'm not getting that vibe, So for me, I love the ritualistic parts of my faith. I just hated the baggage that came along with it. And I really loathe to call it dogma because it's not dogma, but if you're a Catholic, it can be dogma, right? Like rules that come down from certain people over time. That's dogma just as much as the Bible
but
is.
Tradition.
Yeah. And it really bothered me. I had a hard time working out that, okay, well, we're supposed to follow this book that has this set of rules that have been around for thousands of years, but then you just posted an edict or whatever, any other thing a Grand Master would do. It was no different. It was like, okay, the edict for this year is you can only wear green socks in church. Otherwise you're going to go to hell, stuff like that. I'm like, really? I'm like, is this what we're really talking about? Like this little, banal stuff. And that bothered me. So I definitely stopped going to church for a while.
Wow.
And it wasn't until after we had children and my wife found her faith, again, way before I did, that I started going to church again. And we had tried a few different churches and settled where we are now. But I still to this day, and I tell my wife that, and she doesn't understand it, but I miss the ritualistic elements of Mass, right? Like it's solemn and I found a serenity in it. And I truly do miss it. Because for me, going to church now is a lot different than it was back then. But again, I don't miss the extra dogma that came with my faith at the time, or at least how I was told I had to practice it. So then Freemasonry came along, and I've told that story on the show many times. I joined Masonry. I was a Dan Brown Mason. I joined Masonry. I went through 3 degrees. It's just a bunch of old dudes having green beans and smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, this sucks. Right. So So I detached from Masonry for a bit. Never quit, but just wasn't interested in it. And I didn't find my footing with Freemasonry until years later, when I started to find like-minded brothers that came to Freemasonry for the same reason I did, because they felt there was something missing, or they found something that really spoke to their inner beliefs. And it wasn't until that, and I mean, that's going on 10 years now, where I now have a better sense for, like you said, John, taking the things I learned in Freemasonry and learning how to better apply that towards my own faith without beating other people over the head with it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
You
How
like your
you
overall-
apply it to your faith.
Yeah.
Not how you should be beating other people over the head with it. And
Yeah,
how they
exactly.
should interpret this symbol because according to how you're interpreting it for your faith. Yeah.
No, exactly. Spot on.
Mhm.
So, yeah. I was
So
done.
that was special. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so is it fair? What would you say to someone who's against Masonry to say, well, obviously, stories like these show that Masonry does change people, and that you can be influenced by the fraternity and its rituals and its symbols.
That's kind of the point.
I was going to be more Jason than Jason is being right now and say, I wouldn't say shit, because I don't need to tell you that. Because if you want to know stuff, you can come talk to us, but I'm not going to, beat you over the head with it, because I don't care. We're not supposed to, what's our ritual say? We're not supposed to go correct people about Freemasonry. Let them figure that out on its own. But yeah, I mean, 5-6 years ago, I would have totally gotten on Facebook comments and said nasty things to you and stuff.
Wait, someone's wrong on the internet. I must correct them.
Let's correct the internet. But I don't care. I do not care.
At the end of the day, when you look at Freemasonry as one tool in the toolbox to help the individual grow his or her relationship with God, that has a very real impact on the lens or lenses that you use to view your relationship with the Creator. I've grown to conceive of religions as like lenses or contextual frameworks through which you can peer and view different facets of your relationship with God.
I'm sure that you may you'll probably know better than I will, because we kick around like religious memes and stuff in our private chats with each other. But there was one theologian on some Instagram reel who basically said, and I love it, God is the name that we give to when we wrap a coat around like theology. Right?
Yes.
Because we all have a different like interpretation or experience with God, right? But there's not God like capital G. It's the same guy for everybody. It's like, no, but you can kind of use the metaphor of like, well, if there's just some guy wrapped up in a coat, like, and you can kind of make out a form, but it's the physical way that we can manifest the abstract of a higher purpose, a higher calling, a higher sense of being.
And
it's
sometimes
like pagan talking about flat world. Like that's that's
flat world's a good example too. Yeah,
we live in flat world, and the big G is in the third dimension, and that's how we're. And sorry, Jason, I cut you off, man.
I was just making a joke. Sometimes it's three gods in the same trench coat, and we call that Trinitarian Christianity.
Right. There you go. All comes back.
Yeah.
I would love to. Oh, go ahead. I see a comment here. I really want to.
Okay.
Chime.
Let me say one thing, and then hit up the comments. So, the other counterpoint about Freemasonry influencing people is I do see examples every once in a while to come up on my YouTube recommendations of like former Freemason has an interview, and you start to watch and obviously pick apart the logical fallacies that most of these gentlemen go through. But what they'll do is they will start to make some sort of logical argument, and then they will totally twist a fact or something that's not true but has turned their viewpoint of Freemasonry away, and how it's satanic or how it's anti-religious or how it's not compatible with their religion. And you're like, oh, you were so close. You were almost there, and then you took the wrong left turn and you couldn't get back on the freeway. Like, because again, we take good men to make them better, right? We don't have a dogma except for the argument that you guys had. No, we're not bringing that back up. The horse is dead. And yet, if well constructed, you can actually see how it could enhance your personal faith as a moral framework. But there's danger to that, because that requires you have to think for yourself.
Yes.
You have to do the work. No one can do that for you. Let's go to the chat.
And it's an individual journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you, two things. One, can you mute Mr. Tourette's over here? And number two, can you bring up Ariel or Ariel? Bring up their chat. Yeah.
So we're gonna beat this dead horse again.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think so. Because it's a great question and it does get asked, right? So, Ariel, sorry if I mispronounce your name. How could Freemasonry affect your religious views when Freemasonry is not a religion? Well, we literally spent this whole show talking about it. So let me sum it up for you. It can affect your religious views because it engages the parts of you that want to be spiritual, your sense of morality, your own personal, like Jason said, your own personal relationship with the divine, your understanding of life, death, and truth seeking. It doesn't teach a theology, but it does encourage reflection, and that alone can change how you view your faith. You may have gone from just, a check the box churchgoer to someone who actually examines their own faith system, because now they have a language for it where before they didn't, right? So nothing we've said tonight says Freemasonry does not offer salvation, right? So it's not a religion.
Nope.
It does, like Jason said, and for some people it is unnerving, it does force the individual to be in a sacred symbolic space. And it does teach through ritual and allegory, but it doesn't teach you dogma. It teaches you things like, what is truth? What does it mean to lead a virtuous life? And how should we understand the concept of death? None of that is dogmatic. That's part of the human condition. But I think, and I don't want to speak for these other two wonderful gentlemen, I don't think it wraps it up into a box of dogma that now says this is a faith system.
Yeah, just the first thing that came to mind is, how could watching the news affect your religious views when the news is not a religion, right? How could, politics affect your religious views when politics isn't a religion, right? So we are influenced by many things, which also shapes our viewpoint on the world.
Well, and I think the foundational state of mankind is reaching out to God while God reaches out to us. And it just underpins, every human who's ever lived. And so everything we do, whether we know it or not, helps shape our relationship with our Creator.
Any other chats you want to hit up there, Mr. Martinez?
I read slower than you.
Well, bring up the earlier comment. Much love in the chat for your OLR chat on YouTube. The link is in the chat as well. But yeah, in the deconstructing phase, you had a journey. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being vulnerable to share that, because many people are also doing the same thing, trying to deconstruct and reconstruct what they believe.
Well, that's all. Like, Masonry is about growth. It's spiritual growth, it's mental growth, it's growth of character, and that growth is, can take many different forms. Sun card LOR is Lodge of Research, and OLR is Ohio Lodge of Research.
We did use a lot of acronyms tonight, more so than
You know,
Well, that's a TBD on that one.
KK.
snafu.
Awesome.
I forgot
Well,
where I was going.
It was great though.
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Dirty.
Totally transformed my religious viewpoint.
Changed my whole world.
Oh no, it encouraged personal growth. Great.
Nice.
That's what Freemasonry is here for.
I just grew. Right.
Let's,
Jeremiah, do y'all think objective truth is real? We have had episodes on moral absolutism and moral relativism. Go check them out. We do not have time to get into that.
yeah, way to drop that one here in the last few minutes.
A little one.
Love it. But yes, excellent thinking. Love the thought.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in the remaining time, let's go to final thoughts. Jason,
Ooh.
did Masonry break your faith?
It did, in all the best ways. I went through 10 years that were terrifying and dark. But what emerged out of the other side with the help of my brothers, I think is night and day a different, better person. And I said this in the OLR podcast. For the first time in my life, I am content with my relationship with the Creator. I'm not complacent, but I can sit in the stillness of God and be completely at peace. And that is something that is a dragon I've been chasing for most of my 41 years on this planet.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to offer up something that I've never personally told you, but your NDE death presentation has personally changed my viewpoint on things for the better. So it has given me hope and inspiration. So if you haven't seen it, get Jason to come to your lodge and give his death presentation. It's the bomb. Joe, did Freemasonry break your faith?
No. No, I don't think it did. But I just, what the hell? I wasn't done. I don't think it did. It definitely affected how I view my faith, and it's gotten me, Jason said it best, but it's gotten me way more comfortable with exploring my spirituality in my chosen faith system than I ever could without Freemasonry. But at the end of the day, Freemasonry doesn't change your religion. It changes you. So when you change, sometimes your understanding of your faith is going to change and grow with you. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me tonight. But yeah, this was awesome. So
nice. Hey, John, did Freemasonry break your faith? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we just celebrated Easter.
You were such a dork.
My favorite Easter candy is Cadbury cream eggs. And so to use the metaphor of Cadbury cream eggs, it didn't break my faith. It broke open my faith to find even more goodness on the inside. Right? It gave me tools to go deeper. And so I didn't get into the exoteric versus esoteric Christianity part on this show. But yeah, it gave me the opportunity, the permission, and the tools to explore my faith and explore what it meant and go deeper on a variety of theological concepts. And
can we not talk about your leaky, creamy goodness?
It's so good on the inside.
you said have to do with a Cadbury cream egg and going deep on it.
It's exoteric, the shell, the chocolate shell, and then there's the esoteric, the inner.
Stop talking.
Goodness. It's
Joe, we are not kink shaming.
You know,
This is a no kink shaming platform.
you know what? Thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.